I worked as a lawyer for about 6 years, and during that time, I felt this call to ministry that I was not interested in. I was just like, I've already been to graduate school. I have a profession.
What kind of lawyer were you?
I worked for courts. I was clerk for judges mostly.
Do you think you could have gotten Jesus off?
I knew he was going to ask. I knew that was going to come up.
Is there a loophole somewhere in that case that you're like, why didn't they? Okay.
So I worked for appellate courts, and it's hard to have an appeal when someone's already dead.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Well, he did come back. You know what I'm saying?
Did.
You know what I'm saying? He served his 3-day sentence, and then boom.
Yeah.
This is a way to get the word out about the Lord. You know what I mean?
On Tom Simmons' show.
What,
yeah.
dude? I mean, I've looked into this.
Yeah, you're like the Roman Empire.
What?
It's like the Roman Empire. They waited for the Roman Empire to come on Earth, and now they're waiting for you to have a podcast. It's the same thing.
I'm saying
all roads lead to Tom.
The average person has not looked into religion and God as much as I have.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go out on. I'm gonna say that. But
okay.
I've looked into it at least more than 70% of people in America.
Okay, and then that other percentage is like Buddha.
No, that's 30%, dude. That 30% is a lot. So there's other people that have looked into it a lot. I think I'm shocked more people haven't that they don't have stacks of books of different religions and people they've talked to, and I'm shocked by that. So
a lot of people are born into a thing.
So
and then they're like, well, this is the one. Why don't I read the other ones?
Yeah, and then you just learn more about that one, right?
Yeah.
So. And or you go through that thing of fuck that was a lie, you know what I mean? Like, and then you have that anger at religion that you have and you carry.
Then you get that atheist.
You get that atheist vibe.
Yeah,
you don't want
energy.
The atheist vibe the people in here yesterday. There was quite a negative connotation to atheist.
Atheist energy is like, dude. I remember in high school, like kids were atheists, and it was their personality.
What does that mean?
Like. I don't know, like they go out of their, like the people who have like the signs in their yard that say, "Thank science." Like you go out of your way to like to punch down and poo-poo on other people's beliefs. It's like, just have your own belief and I don't know, like no, it's not like.
Did you ever say that to them during Christmas when you were walking along with all the lights or caroling or fucking nonstop cheerleading for Christianity?
Yeah.
Were you ever like, maybe I should keep that to myself a little bit. Fuck that guy with his sign saying he likes science. You know what I'm saying? Do you ever look at it like that?
That's true, but I mean.
I know exactly what you mean, by the way.
Yeah. You're just good-natured ribbing.
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, I think everybody should believe what they want to believe, but whenever, if you want somebody to believe a certain way you do, or you feel a way about something, why be the front man for it? Like maybe you're the only atheist this person knows, or maybe you're the only Christian this person knows, and you're an asshole.
Right.
So why would you?
Yes, I'm with that.
Now that person has bad taste in their mouth or whatever. Which I guess if you're an atheist, you're probably not trying to spread anything. You don't really care.
I used to do a podcast with the guy, and we had him in here one time, and the recording went poorly, the lighting was bad, it was an old set, right? And so you remember Eric, but him, and then I did it with another guy who was he was anti-religion, and he was super like harshly atheist, right? So, which was fine. Like Richard Dawkins, those guys, they're fucking smart, and they're not all like fundamentalist atheists or whatever that would be.
That's an oxymoron.
But I don't know. I feel like they're all like there's a way to. Right. There's a way to reach all those people, which is the 70% of the people that are following their religion. There's a way to reach them without being like, "Hey, you're stupid."
Yeah.
There's a way to reach them within their own religion already, and within their own beliefs, and like, because that place that is God that's in us all is, to me, it's there.
Yeah. Inwardly.
So it's just about like opening that up and using the little tidbits of truth that are in the Bible or whatever, like to find those and get them to use those.
And get to the same thing as everyone else.
Yes, as opposed to like.
My way's the highway.
Yeah.
And like I feel like a big thing, if you're like, a lot of the atheists will be like, you're dumb, blah blah blah. Wouldn't your goal as an atheist just to be tell someone, hey, question it. Question what you believe. I think that should be like the gospel. I mean, I don't know anything.
Yeah, but I feel like
that would be the main goal, instead of being like, you're dumb, I'm right. That was the thing. It was like, you're dumb, I'm right energy.
Yes.
Atheist energy.
You know, it's interesting because they're right. That is but I guarantee you talk to atheists, they'll tell you that's the energy they felt their whole lives from, like, you see it that way because 95% of the people believed like you believed. So it's like this guy trying to rub his beliefs in our face. And he's like, what are you talking about? What about all of culture shoved like, and I'm the fucking insane one because I don't believe the crazy story?
Yeah.
That, you know, can you imagine growing up as among Scientologists and being like, wait a minute, like he wrote this in 1940, whatever it is, like he made this up. Same with Mormonism. Like once you start doing, that's what makes us so mad at religion, I think, because we're like, I've been tricked.
Duped. Had the rug pulled out, you know?
Anyway, so I feel like I represent the normal human being that's like, hey, let's ask questions about, not be a dick about it, but let's try to find what the benefit of this religion is and what is the, like...
My favorite, like someone, like when people say question everything, people are like, question everything, and then someone says why.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun. I thought you'd like that.
Yeah.
That's the name of the special.
Yeah. Not me. Don't question me, motherfucker.
Question
everything else except my beliefs.
I remember...
she started a church, dude. Who starts a church?
Someone who knows what they're talking about.
First of all, I don't know why you said yes. I really appreciate you doing that because and do you know what Ashley does?
Yeah, you're a pastor, right?
Yes. So, pastor or preacher or
pastor?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm the interim pastor of New Garden Friends meeting. Right,
and that's a Quaker thing, right? And I don't really know much about Quakers. I used to think like kind of Amishy, but they're not, right? That's
Amishy.
But they're also very prevalent in Greensboro. Like I get my coffee in Quaker Village, and I get, you know what I'm saying, like right there at Guilford College, which is a Quaker university, right?
Yeah, that's right where we are too.
Oh yeah,
right across the street.
Okay, and then there's the Friends Center Church. That is it on Holden or
on Friendly.
Oh, okay.
Well, so there's First Friends on Friendly.
Okay.
And there are several Quaker meetings in this area.
And so the first sort of Quaker thing that because I read a lot about, at one point in my own life was like, I want to, and he's saying you're pretty spiritual as far as to it, but you've done a lot of looking into different religions and stuff like that. So I've kind of done that too. Like, what brought me around to the Quakers initially was reading Martin Luther King and Gandhi. Both of them were influenced by this book by Tolstoy, which is The Kingdom of God is Within You, right? And so I was like, I got to get that book because it's what influenced both of them, and then when I got it, the only part I really could see that really influenced him in that book was the introduction, which is a writing by the founder of Quakerism in the United States. I can't remember his name, John something or...
I'm not sure. I mean, George Fox is the founder of Quakerism. He's in England.
Okay.
He did come to North Carolina in the 1600s.
And who's the one that went to Pennsylvania?
William Penn.
Maybe it was him.
Yeah.
But whoever... The beginning is an introduction, and it's on nonviolence from the perspective of the Quaker belief system. And it was like, oh, okay, you can see how it inspired both of them in their followings of nonviolence.
Yeah, well, and I don't know if either of you are familiar with Bayard Rustin, who worked with Martin Luther King Jr.
No.
Yeah, so he was a gay black activist who was a Quaker and influenced Martin Luther King in nonviolence. And he was kind of suppressed for a while because...
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, for obvious reasons. But he's really like coming to the fore now, and that's someone I would recommend looking into.
What's his name?
Bayard Rustin.
Bayard?
Yeah, Bayard, Rustin.
Okay, cool. That's interesting because Martin Luther King, you know what I did read something, maybe that's him. In this, I was just reading another book on Martin Luther King about studying his philosophies and stuff, and maybe that's the guy they're talking about that was an early on, because one of the references was like, he wasn't much for gay rights as far as equality or even women, you know, and so that's sort of some of the criticisms on Martin Luther King.
Sure.
And it's, yeah. So the Quaker Church has been sort of on that side of equality, of
kind of
race.
ahead of the curve, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I mean, of race and sexuality for the whole time? Not
the whole time. And you kind of have to separate out those things. So you started by saying it was Amishy. And
yes. So I'm going to say some things that are inappropriate.
No, it's fine. I wanted to go back to that because Quakers, the Religious Society of Friends, is a traditional peace church. And so we do have that in common with the Amish. There are a number of churches, the Brethren, the Mennonites, and Quakers and the Amish that are peace churches.
What does that mean, peace churches?
So
I hope it means what I think it means.
Yeah, I mean pacifist, basically. And Quakers have a testimony for peace or against war, and that's been true pretty much since the beginning. And it's based in the Bible. It's based in like laying down your sword, and also the belief that God speaks to everyone, that anyone can hear from God. And so if you have the same relationship with God that I do, then how could I be violent against you?
Yeah, I sort of have a little bit of that sort of, well, you're a God and I'm God, like we're all pieces of the God. So any harm that's caused to you is harm to me.
Yeah, and Quakers tend to talk about the inner Christ or the inward light, and so that part of God that is in all of us, this kind of spark of the divine.
So have they stuck with pacifism?
Pretty much, yeah.
So there's a difference between pacifism and nonviolent like resistance. So how are you guys on that sort of nonviolent like active resistance, which is a weapon, you know?
It can be. So Quakers tend to believe that we should act in the same way in all areas of our life. And so being violent one-on-one is the same as war.
Yeah.
And so we try to resist violence in all times. And there have been Quakers
resisting isn't pacifist, right? Pacifist is more like, everybody each his own, right?
My whole thing is make it home. You know what I'm saying? I feel like if something is stopping me from making it home safe, then it's just kind of like, bro, I got to get home. You know what I mean? In most situations, I'm not going to get violent. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, I'm a nonviolent person. You know what I mean? I like to box and like spar and shit like that. But it's like, I'm not out here looking for fights or anything like that. But if someone is preventing me from safely getting back home, I mean,
well, the theory is that the theory would be that yes, it's hard because that's the theory. But the theory that I think you're talking about, I don't know, is that any of that, like that's how we create peace and nonviolence in the world, is to be at all times in ourselves. So we have to, in all of those situations, find the most peaceful way to deal with it. Because any sort of use of violence or all that stuff contributes more of it to the world. Like as far as like a mass consciousness, we're adding to that, and then it creates it back on yourself. And I'm guessing it's.
Yeah,
Does that include in sport as well,
though? I know there are some Quakers who are really into sports. I'm not particularly.
I mean, like particularly like combat sports, like boxing.
Oh yeah, that's a good point too.
Like jiu-jitsu, stuff like that. Like an actual, this is a competitive thing. I'm not out here.
The Quaker fighters are mostly sparrers.
I mean, I like to spar. I prefer not to actually need to fight, but it's like I do enjoy a spar.
Yeah.
You know, like a legitimate spar.
No, I meant they're the ones that are they're going in and just taking punches. You know, that's
probably, honestly, but I see that as different. You know, that's a consensual situation that people are agreeing to. That is not the same as like active violence.
Right, but what you're saying is if somebody's preventing you to get home, they know going in. Right, that's kind of understood. It's like a fight, right? They know going in that they're trying to stop you, so it's
or like just like on some you're being very aggressive towards me, and you make this a physical confrontation. I'm not just gonna not
defend yourself.
Yeah, I'm not gonna not make it home.
That's what it's.
And you really got to. It's whatever.
Yeah,
you got till I'm out of breath, low key. Then I'm Second Amendment right.
So where were you raised? Were you raised a Quaker?
I was not.
Where were you like born and raised? Alaska, right?
I was born and raised in Anchorage, Alaska.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah. And I grew up in an evangelical church there. So yeah, fairly charismatic, went to Christian school, and that was good in some ways and not in others. I am of the age where the states at that point were doing the marriage amendments, and that was really what got me out of that church.
You know, this state, North Carolina, was the last state to pass saying we're not going to allow it. Like we were like, I think, right? Like like North, because that's sort of when I used to do this podcast, a different one. And it was with some guys, and it was very sort of trying to defend, like go after religion for doing this. Like I started doing a thing where I was going around and tweeting live services of churches, like, and so I started at like a Southern Baptist church here because the guy was saying, if you don't vote for this amendment to stop gay marriage, it's going to be like the Holocaust. He was like saying things like that, and there was the guy that was like, we need to get the pastor. Like an hour from here, was doing like, well, here's what we need to do. We need to get all the lesbians together and put them in a fence, and then put all the gays together and put them in a fence, and then they'll die off. And there was a lot of amens, and I was like, I have to go to that church. So I would go and live tweet what they were saying, you know, and so but because Minnesota had at the time had a vote and it failed, and North Carolina was like the last state or North Carolina had one and it passed like to stop. And then it failed in Minnesota, and then no other states did it. And then that sort of started that tumble back, you know?
Yeah.
So that when you saw it was happening, that's what made you move here to North Carolina?
No. So I was in high school. Alaska was one of the first states to have that kind of, you know, marriage is only between a man and a woman kind of amendment. And I was hearing not quite that extreme, but similar kind of political sermons. And I was just like, this is not a church I want to be connected with.
Yeah, that's why
I didn't find many when I went around. I got to be honest. There was a couple that I started to like be like, oh, this sounds like a positive message. Like God is not in most churches around that I've went to.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Well, I mean, didn't you find? I'm sure you started looking, right? You were I
left. I was just like, I'm done with church.
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, that's the similar reason why I stopped like actively going to church. It was just kind of.
I'm not going to tell you how to vote, but here's how God wants you to vote.
Yeah, and just like I don't know, it was getting really. It became more political than it did. Like I didn't feel like I used to like even as a kid. You know what I'm saying? Like. I would go to church and, you know, someone would really, you know, say some real shit that really touched you, you know, I'm like, even as a kid. So that's kind of what got me into like, oh, like maybe there's something to this.
I like to think that's what the church said all at once. Real shit. That's like, probably what happened,
right? Jesus does say like a couple times, like he says like in Matthew when he's like, truly I tell you, it's like for a rich man.
Yeah, truly. Like, yo, real nigga shit though.
So, like Mark, he
Mark,
says, truly I tell you. Like the stuff he was saying in Luke was just BSing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just like, I don't know. Then it just became like, so my interpretation, like, and also like when you start like segmenting I look at the Bible as like one whole story. You know what I mean? Like people try to like segment it and like he said this then. So like how I see it is just like, all right, you got the Old Testament, right? Old Testament God, It's just kind of like, all right, he creates, the world and man in his image. Well, I mean, just like God, if you read the First Testament, man is selfish. You know what I'm saying? Man is jealous. Man is emotional. God has wrath. You know what I mean? God got so mad he destroyed the earth one time.
One time.
You know what I'm saying? Maybe a few times.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
But it's just wrath is a deadly sin. So we went across this yesterday.
So when people talk about God's wrath, you know what I'm saying? So it's just kind of like God was an emotional being. You know what I mean? And it's like, I feel like it's controversial to say, but it's just like he had an expectation for people for an experience that even God had not experienced. God didn't live on earth. God has never experienced temptation in the Old Testament. God has never experienced genuine hatred for somebody else or experienced even being genuinely hated and someone being physical or violent about their emotions towards you. God never experienced that. So then it's just like, all right, New Testament, especially believing like the Trinity or whatever, and like the Godhead, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. So Christ is just God in flesh. You know what I mean? It is God in flesh. They're not two separate people. So he comes to experience life, what it is to be a person on this earth that he created. You know what I mean? So he's kind of like, he's experiencing all the physical pains. He's experiencing hunger. He's experiencing poverty. He's experiencing temptation. He's experiencing hatred. He experienced anger. Because even God, when he saw that they were, selling stuff in the temple or whatever, he was flipping tables. You know what I mean? He was upset. He was experiencing what it was to be a human.
Because it didn't give him food. This is the church of I don't know. That's what I call this student. This is I don't know. That's where I come from. Because I from my reading, it's like, I don't know. I'd never really heard of that perspective before. So I'm I think there's a kernel of truth in all of them. I think that he or she, whatever the ultimate thing it is, experiencing through every single one of us, like we're all little tendrils of the same thing. Yeah. And that's why we exist, to have those experiences that you're talking about. And it's not, for me, it's not just through one dude, it's through every person. So when you first came here, right? Like then you come here, you're like, I'm getting out of this crazy church, this blah, blah, and my family, and probably thinks the same as them. And then where do you pick how to come in the United States or the rest of the United States?
Well, it was a long journey to get here. So I was in high school at that time and I went to college in California, which was great. It was so different from anything I'd been to. And,
which college?
UC Santa Cruz.
Okay.
Yeah. And I just didn't go to church. And they had, campus ministry and stuff, but it was fine to not go to church there. And I was pretty happy with that. And I went and lived in Berkeley for a year. And then I went to law school. And so I took this route of becoming a lawyer. I lived in the Pacific Northwest. And that's when I came back to church because I was really unhappy in law school. And like my classmates were just kind of competitive jerks sometimes. And I was looking
there ought to be a law.
Yeah. And I mean, they were insecure, and law school does not bring out the best in people.
I really found myself in law school. It's never been said.
So I was looking for community, and I was looking for a church, and I had a roommate at the time. We were both looking. She'd grown up Southern Baptist in Tennessee, and I'd grown up evangelical, and we were like, okay, not those two.
Right. Yes.
We'll try whatever else.
Isn't it weird though that they have the most influence sort of over the perception of Christianity and the laws being written in the name of Christianity? Those are the two that sort of have the hold, right?
They do. I mean, they've been very involved in politics, which is part of it. Yeah. So we went and visited a lot of churches, and they were nice. A lot of them were good. I almost ended up at an Episcopal church.
Episcopal's good.
Yeah, I like their music.
Methodists are pretty. There's another one, the Methodists.
Yeah, Methodists are good. A lot of the mainline denominations I could fit in pretty well. And then I was visiting my aunt and uncle who lived in Portland, and they were like, your mom says you're looking for a church. We think you might like a Quaker church, because they had been Quakers and had never really paid much attention. But I found a Quaker church and I went and I was like, oh, this is it. This is the thing.
What was the difference? Like, what was the difference maker? Like when walking, what separated them from the other? Is it that feeling, like I said, like, oh, God's here?
It was actually the silence. So Quakers traditionally sit in silence and listen and wait. And the idea is that God can lead anyone to speak. So we sit and we face each other, and out of that silence, anyone can give a message. And I wasn't sure about God. I wasn't sure about religion, but I was just like, oh, the silence is really good for me.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I think one of the things I'd written down just about like that, literally the silence thing is what I've just been reading about and trying to focus on in my own life. So when you say that, I'm like, oh wow, like embrace the silence. And the idea is nothing brings you into the present more than listening to the silence of the now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, so how do you do that? Like how when you say sit in silence, is it like you're sitting there in that sort of anxiety filled, like, is anybody going to say anything? What should I say this? Should I not say this? Does this sound stupid? Like, or are you silence of thought also? How do you do?
So I think that anxiety is common in the very beginning, because you're not used to it, and silence can bring up everything.
Right.
And I think different people have different ways of getting into it. Some people focus on their breath. I have a breathing prayer that I often use that a pastor taught me, which is just like breathing in and breathing out for different phrases. And so the one I use is, God, you are here in this place. Your presence fills it. Your presence is peace. And so with each of those, I'm breathing in and out. And that usually like calms me down. It's kind of like a mantra.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do stuff like that too.
Yeah. And I mean, the more you do it, the easier it is.
And then it just becomes a core of who you are. Like every breath just does that, and you don't have to think it.
Mm-hmm. And I believe that prayer is being present to God. Prayer is breath. It doesn't have to have words. And when you find yourself thinking like, what am I going to have for lunch? Or like going over your shopping list, like just coming back to the breath or the prayer or listening. And Quaker silence is different from meditation in that it has that expectant quality. In meditation, you are letting go, you're focusing in, but you're not expecting anyone to speak. But in Quaker worship, someone might speak. And so you're waiting and you're expecting that message may be from God. We get all sorts of things in the open silence at Quaker worship.
I'm going to have Dunkin' today.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there are stereotypes about this of like somebody standing up and being like, I heard on NPR that,
right.
or what we call like daffodil ministry of like, on the way in, I saw a daffodil, and it made me, but like, you listen to whether it's for you, it may not be, it may be for someone else, with the hope and the expectation that they are feeling led by the Spirit of God to speak.
Right. It's a little like tapping into the collective conscious of the room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we call
I love the silence thing, like what you're saying. Like like in meditation, I'm an amateur at this, but you're right. It's about sort of stopping thoughts and cutting those thoughts off, or sort of starting to follow them and then notice that you're doing it and sort of try to get back to the breathing and blah, blah, blah. But so you just get quiet, and then how do you know the difference between your own ego and hearing the voice that...
Like your God, yeah.
Yeah. Practice. And I think this is part of why we do it in community, because we help each other discern whether it is, from us or from God. And honestly, it's always both. Like you don't have a pure message from God. It's always filtered through yourself, your life experiences, your own metaphors and ways of speaking. But sometimes it does seem more clearly from the Spirit and less from yourself.
Yeah.
Me and Tom were talking about mindfulness earlier, and that was something growing up in church that mindfulness wasn't a word that was.
That's not a Christian word to me.
The New Garden Friends meeting thing, like that's like one of the first words I see. It's like,
oh, really?
Mindfulness community. Yeah, it's like Deep River Sangha. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. It says mindfulness community, and that's just a thing that like I was never really taught about growing up. Mindfulness. So why is that like a
and the silence thing? These are different. That's what I mean. This seems a different version.
Maybe I've been a low-key Quaker this whole time.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are. They just don't know it. Like I don't know.
Well, and you're all welcome to visit
anytime.
No pressure, but if you want to come. So mindfulness, I think, has become very popular in the past, couple decades. I've been hearing it more. And I think because we have this focus on silence and what we call open worship, some of these things from other traditions do come in. I have a friend who works at a Quaker center in Pennsylvania, and he said that the folks who come for the mindfulness retreats complain the most because they are actually paying attention to everything that's there. And so I think it can be hard when you actually start paying attention that a lot of things come to the surface. And the practice is to keep doing it and to let go of things that you can't change.
So then you started going to and you found this thing. You're like, this is cool. I like this. And then I don't know. Like I say, I don't know much about you, but you're a minister, right? A preaching coach.
Yeah.
You had you've written a book.
I did.
So you just don't seem old enough to have accomplished all this, and after just joining the church 2 years ago.
Well, I am in my 40s, but thank you.
Well, the mindfulness keeps you young.
I think, honestly, the Alaskan lack of sun.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
I'll put in a pitch for that. Yeah. So I worked as a lawyer for about 6 years. And during that time, I felt this call to ministry that I was not interested in. Yeah. I was just like, I've already been to graduate school. I have a profession.
What kind of lawyer were you?
I worked for courts. I was clerk for judges mostly.
Do you think you could have gotten Jesus off?
I knew he was going to ask. I knew that was going to come up.
Is there a loophole somewhere in that case that you're like, why didn't they? Okay, sorry.
So I worked for appellate courts, and it's hard to have an appeal when someone's already dead.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Well, he did come back. You know what I'm saying?
Did.
You know what I'm saying? He served his 3-day sentence, and then boom.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty crazy. Like Jesus exonerated, and it's like kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So
the new symbol of Christianity is just a thumbs up.
So I was doing both. I was doing ministry and doing legal work, and it was just too much. I couldn't keep it up.
Because of all the lying and corruption in the court system? Or
no. I mean, honestly, the people I knew in the courts were doing the best they could.
Right. That was a joke, obviously.
Yeah. I have opinions about the U.S. legal system, but the people who were working in the courts where I was were really in there for
Again,
good
I think that's a
reasons.
case of the individual people that are there. You're like, oh my God, these people are great. And then, but the collective group, like I found when I would go to these churches, it'd be like some of these people, I could see why they come all the time. They're wonderful. Mm-hmm. They're so nice to each other. They're blah, blah, blah. And it's like, the things they're in there trying to accomplish but as a group, they are suppressing people and working actively to make that happen. So, nobody sees themselves as being a part of that. Or I'm not doing that. Yes, to me, it's like with people in the United States, we're all like, I'm anti-war. Well, are you? Look what you benefit from and contribute to, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we collectively, what the choices we make there, just because everybody's nice and cool and praying for each other, you're still screwing over a lot of people sometimes.
Yeah. Well, we're all caught in systems of oppression.
Yeah.
It's teams out here, bro.
Huh?
It's teams out here.
I know.
It's a team sport.
So you started.
So I was more of a call to than a rejection of. For me, I felt called to ministry and I didn't feel like I could do both. And so I decided to go to seminary because I felt like that would give me good tools for doing ministry. In the Quaker tradition, seminary is not required, but I do think it's helpful rather than just trying to invent things on your own.
What is that? What is seminary? Like, what is that?
So it's a 3-year program where you get a Master of Divinity. And so I went to Emory.
Master of Divinity.
Yeah. So I have an MDiv, which is what we call it.
Yeah. Do you have gurus or do you have teachers?
Professors.
Okay.
Yeah. And so
and what are they teaching? They're teaching
at Emory. They teach preaching. They teach Old Testament, New Testament, pastoral care. It's a 3-year professional degree. It's actually very similar to law school.
Okay.
And they came up out of the same
You're just
tradition.
learning a different group of laws. There's only 10, so you're in good shape.
Yeah, and so I did that program, which was a much kinder place than law school. And I stuck around.
So there's not as much. It's interesting to think of, like, there's not as much of the competitiveness.
There's still some, yeah, but people are there because they want to help people mostly.
Right.
It's not quite the same. A lot of law students are there because they want to help people.
Look, I got the best score on this. Well, you just lost the humility test.
It's a different vibe. Yeah, so I stuck around in Atlanta for a few years and was part of the teaching team at Kindler School of Theology. And so I taught preaching for about 5 years.
Taught preaching?
Yeah.
So we probably have, there's a similar crossover skills involved in preaching and in doing stand-up.
I'm actually doing a conference on the similarities between preaching and stand-up. Wow. Like I'm speaking at one this spring it's a pastor's conference because I see so many similarities between them.
That's one of the things that made Kinnison so good was like he went with the old Southern sort of preacher, I think that's helped a lot. There's a lot of that in black comedy, or at least when I grew up watching it.
But also, what I'm saying? In black churches, when you were a kid, you have to be able to speak in front of churches. Like it's not even an option. Like you're going to have to pray for the whole church in front of the whole church with a microphone. You're going to have to be able to read out loud from the Bible. You know what I mean?
Solid 5.
You're gonna do some plays, bro. Like against your will, you're gonna do some plays.
Oh, I was in so many plays.
It's interesting that you say that because, like, I hate to keep saying black because it feels wrong, but
African American.
But that's even worse. But the club was a black comedy club. Almost everybody in there was black, and almost all the performers were black. And there's a different level of automatic stage confidence and comfortableness that black comics have over white people, and that might be why, because it's forced on you early you're gonna do these things.
Yeah, and also black churches are very theatrical. You know what I mean? Like we're very over the top people just in general. Right. So it's just kind of like everything is like Sunday service is kind of like one pastor told me, it was like Sunday service is like a show pretty much.
Like Ben, it's great.
Yeah, it's that's like the not the party, but I can't remember exactly what he said, but he was just like or that's game day or something like that. Yeah. Game day is always fun. You know what I'm saying? You're hype, you're playing music, blah 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 blah. Right. You're really just out there just trying to get the energy up. But he was just like, but like Bible study and really like what you do on your own, that's practice. Mm-hmm. Nobody likes practice. Right. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's one of the biggest problems is just kind of like, for some people, they only go to the pep rally. They only go to church on Sundays. They don't do anything on their own. I still, to this day, I don't go to church, but I read devotionals on my own. Right. You know what I mean? Because it's just kind of like, bro, sometimes I need to pick me up. Sometimes I need to be reminded of what I believe, because sometimes whatever situation that's in front of me, at the moment seems bigger than, my belief system. You know what I mean? And even just kind of like, and that's even a big thing even now with just trying to adjust to being a dad. I realized, maybe I'm not as patient as I thought I was.
Oh,
I thought
you're
I was
not. Yes.
I'm not even close.
It's a spiritual practice.
Like it's not even close. So it's just kind of like
when I say I'm going to turn this parenting thing over to God, I mean, can you do this? I got to take a nap.
Right. So it's just like I legit have to, like, when I pray, I pray specifically like, give me the patience. Like just give me patience. You know what I mean? And it's just like, do I believe that God is actively like, we're going to increase the patience? But it's just kind of like, it's something, for the fact that it's something that I repeatedly say every time I pray, God, give me the patience. It's something that I'm always mindful of.
Then you're working on that in a way. You're programming yourself.
Because even it's just kind of like, but if God is in everybody, that's God working within me. That's me exercising that connection within myself to get myself to do better. Right. You know what I mean? Because if I didn't have that, if I wasn't actively praying for patience, I probably wouldn't be. I would probably just be snapping and just getting mad here.
Right.
But that's not the case.
So then do Quakers? I'm sorry to keep going, but I got you all the time. Sorry.
Well, so I wanted to say, like, every Sunday I say to the people in the meeting that we practice a listening spirituality and that we do it throughout our lives. This is not just something we do for an hour on Sunday morning. So it's like your devotionals, you have to practice it. And I think if people take the time every day to listen, to sit in silence, to practice these things, it creates a depth when we all come together. And
I feel like you're less easily swayed. You know what I mean? Because it's kind of like, my mom is a very Christian woman. You know what I mean? A very Christian woman. And, but it's just kind of like, there's some things where I'm just kind of like, you don't have a very Christ-like view on some things. Like not every, just because being a good Christian is more based on being a good person versus attendance. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because it's just kind of like, all right, you go to church on Sundays, but it is just kind of like, you roll your eyes when you see it. Not to put my mom on blast and no shit like that. You know what I'm saying? Both my parents are like this. I mean, most older
but it's funny. You seem to be like right now giving her crap about practice. Mm-hmm. She goes to church. She goes to this. She goes to Bible study.
No, she doesn't go to Bible study.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. And it's just like, but I mean, it's just kind of like, her upbringing. My mom grew up in like rural, like coastal North Carolina. Rural.
Not rural.
Like my grandpa had to sell some land to the state in order for them to build a highway.
Okay.
Rural. My mama grew up raising pigs and like harvesting tobacco and rural.
Okay. All right.
And so and she has those. Like I've been to the church out there, and they're very super right wing. They just black. You know what I'm saying? But everything you think a Republican you hate is, like, that's what they on. Like, bro, no gay shit. No, bro, pull your pants should be fitted like this. You should always be dressed a certain way. Blah, 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 blah. Like, you shouldn't, And so my mom's just kind of very, not to say uppity about those things, but she's very hard set on like certain things. Like she didn't like.
I feel, and if your mom was sitting here, she wouldn't be making me go like, "Oh, I want to go to her church." You know what I'm saying?
I mean, that's why I left her church. Like, but even just kind of like me wanting to grow my hair out was a thing.
Really?
Like I started growing my hair out when I was in high school, and it was just kind of like it was just always because my mom kind of grew up on like you have to always be presented like this. Like she used to say like, "Oh, look like God love you." You know what I mean? But I'm just kind of like, what the fuck does that mean?
That's a good
You know
line.
what I mean?
Look like
if God loves everybody, why the fuck does it matter?
Well,
You know what I mean?
Yeah, he likes it. He likes a nice tight cut.
I don't think so.
You know what I'm saying?
But it's just like, and then
So you started a church, correct?
I did.
You started a church. Where is the arrogance of that? You're like, you know what? I've been looking for a church to go to and maybe work at. You know what? I should just. I'm really connected.
Let me start.
So you're kind of like an entrepreneur.
Impressed.
Or is it like a Subway franchise where they're like, I can franchise a friendly church off to. How does this work?
So I started a church.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I was a co-founder of a church. A friend and I started it together in Decatur.
I used to live in Atlanta. When you said Emory, I was like, where were you? Go ahead.
Close to Emory,
okay.
yeah.
I've been in Decatur.
Yeah.
I turned around.
There are, and I should say this generally, there are different kinds of Quakers. So traditionally it's all silence. The kind I came in with was a Quaker church that had some singing and some prayer, and then mostly silence. That's semi-programmed. The meeting I'm the pastor of now is semi-programmed. We also have an unprogrammed worship, and so in the semi-programmed worship, I give a message, I preach, and then we have silence after that.
So that's what happens in his comedy too. He creates a lot of silence. Right.
Yeah.
I'm playing. He doesn't.
I do.
So there are a lot of different kinds of Quakers here in Greensboro and in North Carolina generally. There are not a lot of different kinds of Quakers in Georgia or in Atlanta. And so I was in a meeting, Atlanta Friends meeting, that was unprogrammed, just silence. And I felt called to preach. And so I was, in the meeting, loved the silence and wanted to have a semi-programmed worship. And so my friend and I started a Wednesday night church in Atlanta Friends meeting called Church of Mary Magdalene. And we had the semi-programmed worship where we would sing, we would pray, and we would have a message and then silence.
Right.
And so we got a lot of people who were new to Quaker worship through that. And this
because you know what it is? It's sort of because I think it would be harsh for somebody to go from what church has normally been like for them to just sitting around quiet, like, and doing
that
silence.
Sounds refreshing.
Yeah.
So it sounds refreshing. Like it sounds great, but I feel like if you're trying to bring people to the Quaker church from mainstream churches and just sort of move them in, that's something they're more comfortable with. That has like the hits from regular church. You get the singing and the preaching. And then you go to the silence instead of the, so it's
Black
like
people come for the drummer, so get you a nasty drummer.
Yeah. So
I'm being so serious.
So we didn't have drums at all, but
invest in that.
Yeah, I think it is kind of transitional. And I think it is helpful to have the explanation of what are we doing and why. Why do we listen?
Right. Plus you learned all those preacher skills in school.
Yeah.
I can't imagine they were like, here's what you need to do. You need to learn. This is preaching 101 in the Quaker church. Shh. Shh. Okay.
Yep, just be quiet. Yes. So that's how and why I started that church.
Then it just grew and grew.
So it was always very small in person. But this was before the pandemic. We had a huge online presence. And so we streamed on Facebook Live, and we would get people from all over the world who were tuning in. And I would ask for prayer requests on Facebook, and people would say things. And so we'd pray for them. And in person, we'd be like maybe 6 or 8 people. It was small, but then we'd have like 800 people on Facebook. And
cool.
Yeah, so that was really cool. And I saw how people wanted that option. A few years later, everybody was doing that, but people with disabilities, people at a distance, they were able to come to our church and really be a part of it.
That's cool. I used that as one of the churches I got thrown out of. I said, he go, "What are you doing on your phone?" And I said, I'm tweeting the service to shut-ins.
To shut-ins.
Yes. So.
We're always on Twitter. The shut-ins are notably on Twitter.
I mean, there are a lot of people with disabilities on Twitter.
Yeah.
But Yeah, so we did that church for about 2 years, and it was always just small. It was kind of pop-up church, and in the end decided to lay it down and not do that anymore. But it was a really good experience.
So you don't do the Church of Mary Magdalene anymore?
No, it was just from 2017 to 2018, those 2 years.
Why'd you choose Mary as the church?
So I love Mary Magdalene,
Okay.
and there are a lot of misinformed opinions about her. She was a follower of Jesus, probably a supporter of Jesus financially. A lot of women supported Jesus's ministry financially and traveled with him.
Right.
And she was the first person in the Gospel of John who Jesus called to preach the resurrection after he came back. So he told her to go to the disciples and tell them that he had risen. And so I just saw her as kind of a patron saint of what we're trying to do there, of a place where women would preach and bring this message.
Just like a thing I was saying earlier, like it's crazy, like I feel like the person that first heard about Jesus being resurrected should have a lot more things named after him. Kind of crazy. And it took so long, and then obviously
is she the Mary? Yeah, is she the Mary from the stone? He who has the without sin cast the first stone too?
No, different one. And so this is part of the
I've
issue.
Always thought of her as that.
Yeah, earlier in the church, there was a leader who conflated a lot of the Marys, and some of them may be connected, but the only thing we know about Mary Magdalene's past is that she was possessed by demons and Jesus healed her of that. The idea that she was a prostitute is just not found in Scripture.
I've always
not to say anything against sex workers. There are sex workers in the Bible, and Jesus was in relationship with them, but Mary Magdalene was not actually one of them. And so it's just strange that you get this woman who, in some Christian traditions, is called the apostle to the apostles. Like, she's so important,
right?
And she gets kind of put into this box of like things that are not true.
In the agnostic
there
gospel,
is, yeah. There's a non-canonical gospel.
Right.
We have fragments of it. I have. Yeah.
Did it fit with sort of? Had you already gone through that before you named the church that, or after that?
I knew about it, and I mean, it's just strange. Like, a lot of biblical and extra biblical texts are odd. Yeah, and I tend to stay with the canonical Bible, but I think it's really interesting that we have a gospel that is attributed to her.
I do too. I find that. Does she have a certain piece of her character that was important to you, or you're just like, we need a, this. It's progressive already, but I'm sure you ran into, like, you can't name there's a reason they're going to name a church after a woman. You're not even, in my religion, you're not even allowed to get up on the pulpit. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I mean, I think people had strong opinions about it, which is part of why I chose it.
Right.
It's a name that's really, it'll grab you.
Yeah, it did. So did you just get rid of all what you do with all the Facebook page, all that sort of went away?
It's still up there. You can see it. Yeah. It's an archive. And so then my book came out of that too. I wrote a book called The Women's Lectionary.
What does that mean, lectionary?
Lectionary. So it's a compilation of texts that preachers use to preach. So most mainline pastors use the Revised Common Lectionary to preach, and it's a 3-year series of preaching text for Sunday mornings.
That's why all churches talk about the same thing.
Yeah, that's why.
Like every single church, like if you drive around literally anywhere and read what the sermon for the week was, they're all the same. Same scriptures and everything, bro.
Huh. Yeah. So we're in year A right now, which is Matthew.
Oh, I thought that was more of a way. To be honest, I thought that was more of a way that the evangelical churches had sort of figured out the way to sort of help politically sort of organize with, like the old Rex Reed and those guys would have I thought that's where it came from.
It's actually the Revised Common Lectionary. You're right.
And how often is it like a Father's Almanac where they come out with a new one every year or so? Or?
No, so it's a 3-year calendar, and then you go back to the beginning. So you do year A, year B, and year C, and then go back. And I'm not the only person who has had issues with the Revised Common Lectionary. It covers a lot of the Bible, but not all of it. Yep. There are a lot of pieces left out. And I found a lot of the parts about women were left out, or they were cut in strange ways. And so I was feeling really torn between using this resource, which is great, to be able to be in community with other preachers and have a lot of resources. People have written about all the texts in the Revised Common Lectionary. And in Church of Mary Magdalene, I really wanted to preach on women. And the people in the church really wanted that too. They really loved it when we had series on women. And so I was talking about this with my partner in the car, and he was just like, why don't you write your own? So I did. So it's a year of preaching on women with one text from the Old Testament and one from the New Testament for every Sunday and holiday.
For a year? That's great. Now, what kind of response did you get on that?
Good. Positive. Yeah.
Are a lot of churches using it?
Yeah, quite a few are. There's actually a clergy group in Scotland this year that is creating extra liturgy around it for churches to use. Cool. Yeah, prayers and activities for kids and all sorts of cool stuff. They're called Spill the Beans. You can find them online.
Okay, so who are the women of the Bible that we don't know about or do know about barely, or like?
Yeah.
I feel like it's very man-centric.
It is. And part of when I started this, I was like, could I even do this?
Let's see if we can think of something. Like
Esther.
Esther's good.
Esther, I don't know much about Esther. Sarah, right? Sarah's one.
Ruth.
Oh, you're killing it right now.
You are killing it.
I wipe the board in Jeopardy when it comes to Bible stuff, man. I clean that thing.
So Ruth is one, and who was the first one you said? Esther.
She stayed with the king.
Ruth.
I can't remember the king.
I'm assuming Mary.
Mary,
the Virgin Mary, and Mary Magdalene are both the Marys. Is there another Mary too?
There are some other Marys. There are a number of Marys. So there's Mary and Martha. Those are two sisters.
Okay.
That you would also have heard of. So
that's the only ones I got. That's a
Jezebel.
small list.
It's crazy.
Jezebel,
they talk about Jezebel the most, and she's the one that did the. No.
Jezebel, okay.
Is she the one that cut Samson's hair? Who's the one?
No,
Delilah.
Delilah. Yeah, it's always Jezebel or Delilah.
So I don't know anything about Esther. I know there's is there a book of Ruth? Is there? But
there's also a book of Esther.
Oh, I don't know either. So who was Esther?
Esther was one of the Jewish people in exile. And there's a whole story. It's basically a novella, the story of Esther. She was a Jewish woman who was brought into the king because he wanted to find a new wife. And so he brought in all these young women and tested them and decided to make Esther his wife. And he didn't know that she was Jewish when he married her. And then one of his higher ups, Haman, wanted to kill all the Jewish people. And so Esther's uncle Mordecai said, you have to tell the king, you have to tell your husband that you're Jewish and not to kill your people. And it's this maybe you were born for such a time as this. And so Esther prayed, and then she went to the king and she said that Mordecai wants to kill my people. And so she saved the Jewish people. And this is the basis for the Jewish holiday of Purim. They celebrate Esther for saving the people.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a good story.
Yeah, I'm surprised we don't know these stories. I like the idea of you saying on their novellas. Do they have writings on these? You know how sometimes they have little novellas on.
Yeah, so there are commentaries. I mean, all sorts of Bible commentaries. And, you were saying you see the Bible as a whole. yes, and there are a whole lot of different genres within the Bible. You know, you have poetry, you have these stories and other novellas, the Joseph story, and it just reads differently than a lot of the other stories.
Some of them are horror stories. Some of them are
some are history.
Lists of names.
Laws.
Begat. Lots of begat.
Songs of Solomon's a little weird. It seems almost like it seems like a steamy novel, like a Harlequin romance between him and another guy. You know? So
it's in the wisdom tradition, and so you read it differently. And I think of it, as like a romance novel.
Yeah.
Because
go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, I have always kind of had more of a view of the Bible as just like, I guess I've always taken it more as literature, as far as like literature that is meant to guide me through my life, essentially. You know what I mean? And still with the understanding of these specific words were written by a human being. You know what I'm saying? Because even it's just kind of like if C.S. Lewis was born in like 2000 BC,
he would have been one of the writers.
Yeah. 100%.
Him and Tolkien would have.
100%. Everything they would have wrote would have been in the Bible.
I have a time in my life where I thought this is the word of God, and then now in my life I have this attitude of, well, what word isn't? So like, there's pieces of it that I'm. And like, even there's truth, like the way Jefferson wrote a Bible, like where he went through and tried and like as he would say to get the diamonds from the dunghill. Like and I think that about not just this book, but a lot of religious texts. But the diamond is in them all. You know, I think like it's a wide net that goes to the same place. Opinion.
And even like a lot of what I've read, you know what I mean? Like a lot of self-help books take a lot of concepts from the Bible and just kind of like.
Well, it's shaped especially Western human thought. The way we think, what we think, the analogies we use, the names we know, like it's like it or not, it's shaped the way we think regardless, I think. You know?
And my approach tends to be going back to stories. You know, growing up evangelical was often, here's the story and here's the moral. And like, if you read the Bible, it's a lot messier. It's a lot more complicated than that and more interesting. And so bringing back that sense of wonder, reading these stories instead of just trying to find like a rule.
I would feel like, I would also feel like a lot of what you say about Quakerism surprises me, because I also feel like Quaker, like there's a fundamentalism to Quakerism that's in my head because it's such an early one with the buckles and the thing, you know, or whatever, and like
that's Pilgrims. I think.
Well, we didn't have buckles.
I don't know why I kind of look at it like that. I think of it as, like I said, sort of Amishy and fundamental, and like, and sort of this is the truth and the Word of God, and and the way you're saying it, like doesn't sound like this and doesn't sound like this is the Word of God, like. I don't know. Am I mistaken even?
No, I think one of the things that is fundamental to Quakers is this idea of continuing revelation.
Continuing revelation?
That God continues to speak and that we can continue to hear.
It's such a progressive version of Christianity for a thing that seems so Amish and old.
We need to work on our PR.
I didn't really understand how many concepts I had in common, like just how I view my own relationship with God and the Bible and stuff like that. Next time I'm in Atlanta.
It's not. There's not. It's in Greensboro is one of the biggest that I've seen. It's bigger to me than it stood out to me way more than when I lived in Atlanta. Like the college and the thing and the friends meetings places. I used to drive by and be like, "Is that an AA meeting? What is that?" You know? It's just a different concept, and I haven't been able to dive in. But I was brought to it through the nonviolence thing, you know. But that silence thing is hitting me because that's what I've been reading about lately. Even with like reading like The Power of Now, and in Marcus Aurelius, and a lot of like even reading Mandela. There's a lot of sort of getting into the silence of the now and the centering yourself, and that's where whatever God is. And then you come in and you're talking like it. I love when I hear the truth in other places, and it reinforces what I believe. because it's not just coming from one thing and I have to choose this over this. I feel like they're all, there's a thing that they strengthen they all feed off of each other, you know?
Yeah.
So what keeps you just in the Quaker thing as opposed to the Tao or the, you know, the Gita or, you know, any of these things?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Part of it for me is that I do come out of the Christian tradition. You know, I was raised that way, and it feels like there's still so much here for me within this one path. And yeah, I like to honor other people's traditions and go deep within my own. And I work with people in all sorts of different traditions, you know, mostly other Christian denominations, but other religions too. And I like to be able to sit within my own and listen to other people who are, you know, in their own as well. I have, you know, Jewish friends and Buddhist friends, and I love comparing them like you are doing, but I don't feel the need to incorporate other traditions necessarily.
What are the ones that sort of conflict with you guys that are like, no, this is like the Presbyterians or the Southern Baptist? I'm just naming like, or even sort of like the prosperity preacher. Like a lot of are there, or the evangelical right? Do you run into like, you guys aren't Christians?
We do sometimes. Yeah. And I mean, we have a big Black Lives Matter sign outside of the meeting house, which we occasionally get people coming in and being like, you know, how could a church do this? And so they bring the conflict to us. But so I think any church or denomination that is unwilling to see the humanity in all people is
they do that. They use that excuse of, I don't know if it's they, blah, 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 but I hate the sin, love the sinner.
Yeah, which I don't think people's consensual relationships are sin.
This is where you're like, you might want to look into that silence thing we offer, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the premise of that is a non-starter for me. Like, love all people.
Yeah.
Period.
That's a Bill Hicks book. So, are there specific sort of, what's the dogma of the Quaker faith?
So some people would point you to what we call the testimonies, and that's kind of a shorthand. It's spice or spices. And so it's simplicity, peace, integrity, community, equality. And I think that was created for children to be able to remember them, but coming back to those ideas of everyone being equal or living simply or being in community, and peace, obviously, are important for us. We're a non-creedal church, so we don't have like something that we all agree to or something that we all say. And so Quakers look different in different places.
It just shocks me, to be honest. Like that a church Quakers could be around for so long and be so progressive. It just seems like they would have been killed by Christians.
Well, I mean, some were.
Okay.
Yeah. We have a few
especially with
martyrs.
That pacifist idea. It's like you're not really fighting back like the Mormons. You're like,
Yeah, if you go to the Boston Commons, there's a statue of Mary Dyer who was hanged there. She was a Quaker.
Mary Dyer's a name that's another Mary, but I'd sort of know that name somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How.
So she was killed by the Puritans.
Right?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
They tend to do that.
Not fun hang the Puritans.
Yeah.
I mean, not if you're not with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot more Quakers were jailed than were killed. But in the early days, a lot of Quakers were put in jail, mostly for not paying tithes to the Church of England. Yeah, like they refused to do that.
How are y'all on tithes now? Like, how are you guys on?
Well, it's not a tax now. It's not required. But I'd say Quakers could probably contribute more financially than
okay. You're like, we don't have a strict rule about it, and that's why we're broke. Can anybody help us?
Honor system.
Yeah.
Basically.
You don't. Friends don't lend friends money. Okay, that's the way it works.
I was thinking like the Puritans, like we were always told in school, it's like, oh, the Puritans came to America to like flee oppression, and I was like, maybe just nobody liked them there. Like they don't sound very fun.
Well, they wanted religious freedom to practice their own religion, not for everybody.
Yeah,
well, our religion is no one else should practice any other religion. That's what we believe.
Yeah, so Quakers weren't very popular.
So,
with them.
So when you moved here, now what brought you to? We gotta. I know you gotta go.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I moved here for the community. Like you've said, there's a huge Quaker community here in Greensboro, and I had a lot of friends over the years from this area, and so I just wanted to move here and convince my partner to come with me, and it's been a very good move for me. So I was here for about a year before I got my current job and was just,
So what's your current job?
Working at New Garden Friends Meeting, being the interim pastor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that just reached out to you. I was like, I want to learn more about meditation, and I literally want to talk about different religions with people because I want to do what I'm going to talk about, which is find sort of the core, and I want to. I'm the church I don't know. You know what I mean? So I want to learn about it.
Meditation Greensboro, and I didn't want someone who was like self-proclaimed guru.
I want that person too. I want that person too.
I didn't want someone who was self-proclaimed guru. I wanted someone who it was like, you went to school for this stuff. Like you started a church. You doing this. I was like, that's the one.
But I want them all. I want. You know what I'm saying? I want to. I want to learn. So I want to
spiritual consultant.
And because I get this, like yesterday they were telling me I give off an angry atheist vibe, and I'm like, I don't have that. I'm not an angry atheist, but I get that regularly. Like I write on a TV show too, and like specifically the showrunner will be like, Tom, why do you have all this hate religion joke? And I'm like, I don't hate religion, but any sort of, I think, questioning of it comes across as sort of angry at the church or blah, blah, blah. And I guess I have some, but I don't feel like I know I'm not an atheist because I think atheism is its own fundamentalism of and a denial of, I think, science and the evidence that we all sort of have in ourselves of I'm connected to something bigger. I don't think that's delusion. I think that would have to be mass delusion. And I think, anyway, so
I sometimes joke that I have resting tell me your life story face.
Yeah. That's the problem with being a listener is you have to. Oh my God, these people, they never shut up.
You sit there and silently call me to preach, call me to talk right now, please.
That's why I had to start a talking church in my church because I couldn't do with all the listening. I've got things to say now. Right? So now do they allow as much sort of preaching and stuff as you'd like here in Greensboro?
Oh, yeah. And I actually told them that I would preach 3 times a month. So I want to hear other voices. I want other people to speak in our worship. And it's good for me to have, a Sunday or 2 a month off. But I could be preaching every week if I wanted to, and probably multiple times a week.
So you enjoy getting up there and doing it?
Oh, I do. I love it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's cool. Do you ever fight with I'm with us performing wise, it's like you go through streaks where it's going through you, whatever, and other times it's just forced and I didn't have it today, you know what I mean? Or I don't want to do this anymore. And then and the next thing you know, you want to. Do you go through all that sort of stuff too? Or?
Yes. And I've found, maybe this is the same for you, you don't actually know when something's reaching someone. It can feel terrible to you, and someone's like, that's the best you've ever done.
That's great. It's so what? How do I not know?
Yeah.
You come up and feel like, that was great.
Yeah, or going in, sometimes I'm like, this one feels like phoning it in. And then it's like the best, you know, it works out just fine. And so I think you can always trust your own sense of how it's going.
Yeah. So I can see you have like a sparkle in your eye when you talk about it.
I love preaching, and I love talking about preaching.
Yeah. So where could people like go, and which specific church or whatever are you preaching at?
So I'm at New Garden Friends Meeting,
okay.
Which is ngfm.org, and we're also on Facebook. So if you want to like check out we have Facebook Live. You can see what we're doing there. And if you want to find me specifically, my website is ashleymwilcox.com.
Okay. So you just show up on a Sunday, whatever times the services are, and you just go in and listen?
So we have semi-programmed worship at 11 o'clock on Sundays.
Just one? There's only one show?
Yeah. So
well, a lot of them have like a 9, 11, a 1. Like they have multiple shows and performances, and then, you know.
Yeah. The church I went to had a breakfast in between.
Yeah.
Nice. Our unprogrammed worship's at 9. So if you want to go and just sit in silence, come at 9 o'clock. And if you want, you know, some singing, a message, and silence, come at 11.
Why would I go to a building to have silence when I could just like sit in my car in the parking lot and have silence? What's the appeal or the difference? Like, all right, I'm just going to sit quietly in my couch versus coming to
How
church.
good are you at sitting quietly for long periods of time?
That is a very good point. It's something I'm working at. Like I'm trying to like extend my alarm to be like, do it for 12 minutes, do it for 13 minutes, do it for, you know, like.
Yeah. So if you come, if we're sitting for half an hour, there's real pressure to sit there for half an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or, you know, an hour if you come to the earlier one.
Is there guided silence, or do you just walk in and quietly you have to be quiet?
For the 9 o'clock is just quiet. The 11 o'clock, it is, you know, we have these things that lead into the silence. And I don't want to just be glib about it. I think there is something different about gathering with other people and experiencing that together. You know, we all bring that of God with us. And so I think sitting in silence on your own is very good. And sitting in silence with other people is also very good.
I love that idea. The hardest part for me would be the immediately afterwards when everybody starts talking. That's when I'm like, I got to go.
Yeah. Some people do. They're just like out the door. Yeah.
That's neat. I think I'm going to try it.
Yeah.
I think that sounds cool.
Come visit.
That sounds good.
Yeah. I really appreciate you coming in. I hope you could do it again, or you'd want to do it
sure.
again.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, we'll have him use a few less F-bombs in front of you. You know what I'm saying? Like,
it's fine.
But he was actually telling me, Tom, watch your language a little bit tonight today. And
I said just to be safe.
Yeah, and I was like, I'll be fine.
No, it doesn't bother me.
I figured it didn't, but I just wanted to be safe.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you coming. And seriously, this is all interesting to me. I have a bunch more questions too. So I'd like to, as I come across more.
Yeah.
You know.
Let's do it again.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. It was good meeting you.
Thank you. Good to meet you.
Awesome. We did it.
Yeah.